I barely even did anything. It's almost exactly the same. Today we're gonna find out just how good the Matchless C-30 amp model is in the Line 6 HX devices. Now this is my favorite amp in the world, the 1994 Matchless SC30. I love this thing. I think the C-30 is the greatest amp ever built. It's my favorite. And Line 6 has modeled it, both the 12AX7 channel, the EF86 channel, and the jumper channels. We're going to test out both the 12AX7 and EF86 channels today and just see how close they are to the real thing. So before we get into it, I'm going to tell you how I set this experiment up. First thing is, we've got the amp and it's running into a 2-Notes Captor X. Now, I've got the Captor software right up here, so we're gonna keep the IRs consistent. Now, they are impulse responses of the V30 speaker that's in this amp. I'm using the 121 and the TF51, so it's a ribbon mic and a condenser mic. In the Helix, I have a very simple patch set up. I basically have an input, which I'm running my guitar into Line 6 Helix. I've got a volume block, so I can turn volume up and down. And I have a dual IR block where I've loaded those same two impulse responses. So we've got the 94 V30 121 and the 94 V30 TF51. No low cuts, high cuts, pan straight up the middle. Same here in the Captor. No EQ, just the IRs. So that part is consistent. Okay, and then what I've got in Helix is I've got this send and return block. So guitar goes into Helix, then the send is coming right here to the amp, and then the return comes out of the 2-Notes. The amp is connected then to the Captor. Return comes out of 2-Notes. And then what I've done is I've mapped the IR button and the send return loop to a foot switch so we can just turn them off and on. So here you can see they flip-flop. I don't have the amp model in the Helix yet, but I'm gonna let you hear what the amp sounds like. I could actually use a little more gain. If this looks like it's gained up quite a bit, you are correct if you're familiar with a C30. We actually did a video with this amp and Bradford's C30, which is a new C30 from 2023, I think. And the volume on this channel, volume at noon was the same as Bradford's volume here. So, you know, component variance, that kind of thing. This thing was built 30 years ago. They're not all, like, the positions on the knobs are not always the same. So I'm gonna turn it up, I don't know, to maybe 1 o'clock. Let's throw in a Line 6 amp model. I'm gonna grab the C30 right here, Matchstick channel 1. That is the C30 12AX7 channel. I'm gonna dial it in the way I usually do. I usually run gain right around 3. Bass and middle are typically pretty much up the middle, and then I kind of cut, you know, use the cut to get it to taste. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this off, and I'm gonna map it to my button that says real and digital. So now when I press this button, right now I've got the real amp in. I press the button, it turns the real amp, the effects loop off, and the amp and IR blocks are now on. Let's listen to what this sounds like. It's already pretty close. Gosh, how is it so close? My goodness. All right, it's a little louder, so I'm just gonna I barely even did anything. It's almost exactly the same. You might argue at this point, you might say, well, you're not running into a real cab and you're not mic'd, you know, comparing a mic'd cab. If you mic this amp and then, you know, play it, and then shoot IRs of the cab exactly as you had it mic'd, which is exactly what we did. And then run it through the IRs, it sounds pretty much identical. I'm gonna match what we've got here. The knobs are not in exactly the same place. In fact, the cut on the amp model is like here, but I've got it there. But like I said, we're using our ears to match things up, and it sounds pretty much the same. Here we go. Are they exactly the same? I mean, they're close. Really, really close. Now, one thing a lot of people will say, including us, Bradford and I have said this before too, and maybe I'm about to just negate my whole point, is that you can get the amp model to sound the same as the real amp, but things start to get different when you start pushing things into it, like compression, overdrive, that kind of stuff. So let's put in an overdrive and see how they react to that. Granted, it's a digital overdrive, but the points should still stand. I'm just going to go to the favorites folder here because I have a whole bunch of favorites saved. I'm going to use the ODR1 because I think that sounds really good in the Helix. This is sort of one of my go-to settings. I'm going to tweak it a little bit though. And now that's on a foot switch, so I can just turn it on and off. So here we go. We're going to listen to the ODR1 into the real amp and then into the amp model. I'll put it up on the screen what you're hearing. Now, another way to really test this out is running reverbs and stuff into the amp. We're only in a mono situation here because I only have one C-30. I don't have two, sorry. Let's put our plate reverb in, the plate basic, and then let's put in the big dynamic hall that we like to use. Dynamic hall, big. And then let's put some delay in here too, shall we? I put a vintage digital dotted eighth delay in front of it. Let's add like the big reverb. I think, yeah, we're on the real thing. I mean, it's pretty close. You might notice like when I turn that effects loop on and off, sometimes there's like a pop. I don't know how to get around that. Line 6, how do we get around that? All right, let's do the biggest test of all. Drive with the big reverb into the amp. I've got it all on. We got delay, reverb, drive. We're on the real amp. Let's listen to it. difference? Does it sound that much different to you? And if it sounds different, does it sound like noticeably better? Does the real amp sound noticeably better than the Helix amp model? Let's move on to channel 2. We're listening to the real amp. I haven't dialed this in. Channel 2 of the C-30, the EF86 channel, is awesome. A lot of people actually prefer the this channel. It's a little thicker. It's got a different tone stack. So it's got this rotary knob that just removes bass as you go down. So let's pull up the amp model and see channel 2. The amp model has a tone on it, and you can see it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It corresponds to the actual control. And then you've got the cut, which I'm running at about half. Presence on, by the way, on these Line 6 amp models, the presence is at 0 because there is not a presence control on this amp. So to emulate the amp itself, leave presence at 0. But if you hear like, I need more presence, you can obviously add it. Okay, so I've got the cut. We demonstrated for channel 1, the cut needed to be a little higher on the digital model. And I don't know what year Line 6's I think it's a DC-30. I've seen it. It's green. It looks kind of old. I don't know if it's from the same era. But anyway, let's listen to this again, and then we'll try and dial it in. I can tell you right now, this is going to need way less drive. Okay, here we go. Real amp. That sounds so good. All right, digital amp. Often, you know, if you want to run it a little bit cleaner, we can pull it down and see how it does. So let's turn on just like a basic plate reverb and a compressor. So now we've got a little bit of effects going into the amp block, and it sounds like this. Looks like we're on the real amp. Let's do the same test here where we're going to put some overdrive into them. I'll put on the screen what you're hearing. So first we're going to start with the real amp. I feel like I'm hearing like a little more low end in a good way from the amp. And I'm on the 1, 2, 3, the third notch on this tone control. Really this tone rotary switch and the cut are where you're gonna get a lot of the, you know, that's how you dial this channel in. So I'm gonna go up to 4 on the digital model and see what it does. Another thing that I'm hearing in the real amp is that reverb level is a little higher. And remember I mentioned this amp I feel compresses a little more than a lot of amps that I've used. So that compression, that internal compression that the amp is doing, because that reverb is in front of it, it's bringing it up with, especially with this drive on. and the Line 6 amp model isn't doing that. All right, so let's run some reverb and delay, like some bigger reverb and delay into this channel of the amp and see how it responds. First the amp, then we'll switch to the digital model. I do this all the time. Like, I capture an amp, I mic it, I capture it with Quad Cortex, with Kemper, with Tonex. I create impulse responses of the cabs. I tone match the amp in, you know, the fractal devices. I create these custom impulse responses that make the Line 6 amp models sound just like the real amp. I do it all the time, and I always come away thinking like the digital stuff sounds like the real thing. It really does. But at the same time, there's always in the back of my mind, I'm like, but the amp has to sound better. The amp, I want to play the amps live. I want to get some capture. I got 2 of them, as you can see. There's a video coming because I'm going to use them live with real amps. And because I think like it has to sound better. And then you do an experiment like this and it sounds the same. It's like, I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times. It's still kind of like blows my mind a little bit, you know, how close this stuff is. Now, a few more notes in conclusion. You might think to yourself like, well, running the amp into the impulse responses neuters the amp or makes it not sound as good. I disagree. Like I said, I want to do a video where I show how close those impulse responses sound to the mic'd cab, how good they respond. And the aux is the same way. Their cabinet modeling is awesome. I just wanted to use a captor today. One, because captor is great. It's a lot more affordable than an aux. And you can load these IRs, which evens the playing field in the Helix and with the amp. But this thing sounds like Line 6. You nailed it. If you want to see this comparison with more amps, I got a lot of amps in the room that also exist in the Helix or in the Axe effects. I'd love to do more of these. This is a fun little experiment, a fun comparison. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.